In the video, Gen AI was a mistake by Kylo Nico. The creator responds to a specific and deeply disturbing incident. A fellow artist named Marxist-Leninist discovered that Twitter's Grok AI was editing her real-life photographs without her consent, turning them into explicit AI-generated images and posting them on the platform. Kylo Nico documents this situation, reads Twitter's privacy policy allowed to demonstrate that users automatically grant a worldwide royalty-free license for their content to be used in AI training, and walks through alternative platforms where artists can upload their work. The video is raw, angry, and personal, and it captures something real: the violation, the helplessness, the sense that a machine you never agreed to is now consuming your face, your art, your identity. But the way Kylo Nico frames the problem, and the way most mainstream critics of generative AI frame it, stops one step short of the full picture. The anger is justified. The violation is real. But the solution is not just leaving Twitter for Blue Sky or Newgrounds or NeoCities. The solution cannot be platform hopping within the same system of ownership that created the incentives for this abuse in the first place. Let us begin with the material conditions of the problem. What is generative AI really? It is a massive concentration of computing power that extracts and recombines human labor recorded in art, text, photographs, code, and music. An AI model does not create value from nothing. It consumes stored human labor training data scraped without consent or compensation, and it represents that labor in new combinations designed to simulate creativity without paying the artist. From a Marxist perspective, this is not technological progress. It is a new method of expropriation. Capital has always sought to lower the cost of labor. First, it broke craft guilds and replaced skilled artisans with factory workers. Then it automated factory work, moving production overseas to cheaper labor markets. Then it automated that automation with robots. Now it is trying to automate creativity itself, because art, design, music, and writing are labor, and capital wants that labor for free. The history of this expropriation is important. The enclosure movement in England, which Marx documented, was the process by which common land was fenced off and privatized, driving peasants into cities where they had no choice but to sell their labor to factory owners. Generative AI is an enclosure movement for the digital commons. Every image, every piece of writing, every song uploaded to the internet over the past 20 years is the digital equivalent of common land. And just as the English gentry used laws and fences to steal common land, the tech industry is using terms of service and automated scrapers to steal the digital commons. They are enclosing the internet. And the artists, writers, and musicians who created that commons are being driven into a labor market where their skills are devalued by the very machines trained on their own work. Elon Musk's Twitter, now called X, represents a particularly aggressive front in this war. Musk purchased Twitter for $44 billion, saddled it with enormous debt, fired 80% of the workforce, and told advertisers to go fuck themselves. To generate revenue, he turned to AI as the new frontier. Grok, the platform's AI assistant, is marketed as a free speech alternative to ChatGPT and Claude. But what it actually is a data extraction machine embedded directly into the platform where hundreds of millions of users post their most personal content. The edit button that Kylo Nico describes is not a feature. It is a mechanism. It allows users to take any image on the platform, feed it into Grok, and have the AI generate a modified version. And because of Twitter's terms of service, which Kylo Nico reads aloud in the video, every user has already granted a worldwide, non-exclusive, royalty-free license for their content to be used in exactly this way. This is not a bug. It is a feature designed by, and for capital. Twitter does not need to pay artists for their labor because the platform has redefined that labor as something users give away for free in exchange for access to the platform. This is what Marx called primitive accumulation by other means. The platform does not own your art in the traditional legal sense. It owns the right to do whatever it wants with your art, including feeding it into a machine that will compete with you, replace you, and devalue your labor. And you agreed to this when you clicked accept on a terms of service agreement that no one reads. Now, Kylo Nico identifies the problem with an intuitive class instinct. They say, these big companies don't give a fuck about you. All they care about is how they can maximize profits, how much they can show investors that they have added this new feature. This is correct as a description of surface behavior. But what is missing is an understanding of why this behavior is structurally necessary. It is not that Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg are bad people who individually decided to harm artists. It is that the capitalist mode of production compels every firm, no matter how large, to pursue constant growth, constant extraction, and constant reduction of labor costs. If Twitter did not train AI on user data, its competitors would. If Twitter did not give investors a story about how AI will revolutionize the platform, its stock price would fall. The executives have no choice. They are agents of capital, not sovereign decision makers. The system compels them. This is why switching platforms is not a sufficient solution. Kylo Nico recommends Blue Sky, Mastodon, Newgrounds, NeoCities, and other alternatives. And these are genuinely better platforms in the sense that they do not currently train AI on user content. Blue Sky has explicitly stated it will not train generative AI on public posts. NeoCities allows you to create a robots.txt file that blocks scrapers. These are real improvements. But they are improvements within the same basic structure. Privately owned platforms that can change their terms of service at any moment, that are funded by venture capital that demands a return, and that will face the same competitive pressure to extract value from user content as their predecessors did. Blue Sky began as a project inside Twitter before spinning off. It is built on the app protocol, which is open, but it is also a corporation that will eventually need to generate revenue. What happens when investors demand growth, and the easiest growth is the same kind of data extraction that Twitter does today? Mastodon is different in structure. It is decentralized, open source, and not owned by a single corporation. But Mastodon instances are run by volunteers or small organizations with limited resources. They can be defederated. They can be shut down. They can be overwhelmed by harassment campaigns that their volunteer moderators cannot handle. The material conditions of Mastodon are better, but not solved. And none of these platforms address the fundamental issue. Generative AI models are being trained on the entire internet, not just on one platform. Even if you delete your Twitter account and move to NeoCities with a robots.txt file and nightshade and glaze on every image, your pre-existing data is already in the training set. The cat is out of the bag. Kylo Nico also discusses Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which protects platforms from liability for user-generated content. They correctly identify that repealing Section 230 would have enormous consequences for the internet. But here the analysis needs to go deeper. Section 230 is the legal foundation that allows platforms to operate as passive conduits rather than active publishers. It is why YouTube can host millions of videos without being sued for copyright infringement every time someone uploads a clip. And it is also why Twitter can allow Grok to edit images without being held directly responsible for the non-consensual explicit content that results. The contradiction is that Section 230 simultaneously protects free expression and protects the infrastructure of exploitation. A Marxist analysis does not advocate for repealing Section 230 because that would give the state even more power to censor the working class. But it recognizes that Section 230, as currently constructed, allows capital to extract value from user labor without liability. The solution is not deregulation or re-regulation within the capitalist framework. The solution is public ownership of the platforms, democratically controlled, with terms of service written by and for the users whose labor creates the value. Let us look at who benefits and who loses from generative AI. The beneficiaries are clear: the shareholders of Microsoft, Google, Meta, Tesla, and a handful of AI startups like OpenAI and Anthropic. These are among the wealthiest individuals and institutions on the planet. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is worth billions. The investors who back OpenAI have seen enormous returns. The venture capital firms that poured money into generative AI are betting that the technology will enable them to replace hundreds of thousands of high-skilled workers and capture the value that those workers previously earned as wages. The losers are equally clear: artists, writers, musicians, programmers, translators, designers, and every other knowledge worker whose labor can be simulated by a machine trained on that same labor without compensation. Kylo Nico is an artist. Marxist-Leninist is an artist. The VTubers who use avatars to protect their real identities from this exact kind of abuse are artists. They are all part of the working class, not in the old industrial sense, but in the Marxist sense. They sell their labor power to survive. They do not own the means of production, and the products of their labor are appropriated by capital. The fact that an artist works freelance rather than in a factory does not change their class position. It changes the form of exploitation, but not the fact of it. And here we must address a key insight from Lenin's theory of imperialism. Lenin argued that capitalism in its monopoly stage seeks to export capital and control markets globally. The tech monopolies of today, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, do exactly this. They extract data from users worldwide, concentrate it in a few data centers, and use it to train models that will compete with the very workers whose data was taken. The AI industry is not a sector of the economy. It is the latest stage of monopoly capitalism, where control over data becomes control over the means of production for the entire knowledge economy. The data centers that Kylo Nico mentions, which produce more pollution in a month than a car plant in a year, are the factories of this new stage. The GPU clusters are the assembly lines, and the artists and writers are the new proletariat. The specific horror of generative AI for women, which Kylo Nico touches on with genuine empathy, is also a class issue. The non-consensual generation of explicit images is not just a technology problem. It is a form of gender-based violence enabled and amplified by capital. The platforms profit from the engagement that this content generates. They profit from the outrage, the traffic, the debate. Every time someone posts about Monica Sine's situation, that post generates ad revenue for Twitter. The platform is monetizing her violation. This is not a side effect. It is the business model. What is to be done? Kylo Nico offers individual solutions: leave Twitter, use Nightshade and Glaze, upload to Newgrounds, make a NeoCity site, and collective solutions call your representatives, protect Section 230, talk about it. These are not wrong. They are insufficient. The individual solutions are necessary for survival in the short term. Artists must protect themselves. But collective solutions that stop at calling elected officials within a capitalist state will not change the fundamental structure. The state of the United States is a capitalist state. Its regulatory agencies are staffed by former industry executives. Its Congress is funded by corporate donations. The idea that the same government that bailed out the banks, approved media mergers, and deregulated the telecommunications industry will now regulate AI in the interest of working artists is a fantasy. The labor movement offers a different path. Artists, writers, and creative workers need to organize. The Writers Guild of America strike in 2023 was a victory against AI encroachment in Hollywood. The Screen Actors Guild won protections against AI replicas of performers. These victories were won through collective action, not individual platform switching. The same model needs to be applied to digital creative workers, freelancers, and the broader precariat. A digital workers union that bargains collectively with platforms, that demands consent and compensation for AI training data, that strikes when platforms violate those terms, that can actually shut down a platform by withholding the labor that makes it valuable. That is real power. But even a digital workers union operates within capitalism. The ultimate solution is to remove these decisions from private hands entirely. Social ownership of the major platforms, democratically controlled, operated as public utilities rather than profit extraction machines. An AI model owned by the public, trained on data that was explicitly and fairly licensed, producing tools that augment human creativity rather than replacing it. This is not a utopian dream. It is the logical conclusion of the analysis. If private ownership of the means of production creates the incentive to exploit user labor, then the solution is to make the means of production publicly owned. Kylo Nico's video ends with a call to protect your art, protect your privacy, and call your representatives. The anger is justified. The warning is real. But the struggle cannot stop at individual defense. Generative AI is not a mistake in the sense of an accident that can be corrected by better engineering or different platform choices. It is the logical expression of a system that treats human creativity as raw material to be extracted at the lowest possible cost. The mistake is not generative AI. The mistake is capitalism. The fight against generative AI is a class fight. Artists and creative workers are not a special interest group. They are part of the working class, and their struggle against expropriation by AI capital is the same struggle that factory workers waged against automation that eliminated their jobs without providing alternatives. The demand must not be merely for ethical AI or opt-in consent within the existing framework. The demand must be for democratic control of technology itself. Who owns the servers? Who controls the training data? Who decides what the AI is allowed to do? As long as the answer is a board of directors accountable only to shareholders, the answer will always be extract as much value as possible and let the artists and the violated and the displaced fight for scraps. This is the Marxist-Leninist analysis that the mainstream conversation avoids. Kylo Nico has done the important work of documenting a specific injustice and giving voice to the anger that millions of artists feel. That documentation is valuable. That anger is fuel. But the fire needs to be directed at the class enemy, not a platform, a billionaire, or a technology. The enemy is the system that makes exploitation not just possible but compulsory. And the only force capable of defeating that system is the organized working class, including the creative workers whose labor is being stolen today, building a world where technology serves human need rather than profit. In solidarity, fight the power. Organize your workplace. Join a union. And yes, leave Twitter. But do not mistake the defensive battle for the war.